Hey guys, welcome back to Jess Reads Romance. I'm Jess and today I'm going to be doing my July wrap up. I really don't have that many books that I haven't already talked about in July. I feel like the second half I didn't quite read as much just because my schedule at the hospital was a little bit kind of on top of each other with extra classes I had to go to because I'm newbie nursey. So the main books that I have to talk about, which aren't rereads, are the rest of the series by Julianne Long that I binged. It's the Palace of Rogues series, and the last one I updated you guys on was the very first one, Lady Daring Takes a Lover, which I absolutely loved. So I basically binged the rest of the series except for the newest book that just released last month, and I just filmed my August TBR and now I'm just realizing I forgot to include the last book in the series as part of my August TBR. It's definitely there. It's definitely part of my August TBR. I will be reading it because this series has been amazing, honestly. Julianne Long, fantastic historical romance writer. So the heroine for book 2, Angel in a Devil's Arms, her name's Angelique, and if you read the first book in the series, interesting setup in how these two women meet in the first book. Angelique was actually the mistress of the heroine from book 1's husband who died, and after he died they were both in dire straits and they decided to team up. Instead of like hate each other, they teamed up because both of them didn't really love the guy. It was just an arranged marriage for Delilah, and Angelique just needed protection. So anyway, they have opened this inn, but it's in an unsavory part of town and also had a former reputation as a brothel, so they're kind of fighting against that. And Angelique and her hero, Lord Balt Lucian, he is a bastard son of nobility, but the king actually granted him a viscountcy before his father basically got married and decided to dump his mistress, Lucian's mother, and his son, and he stopped paying attention to them and they were like left in dire straits. So Lucian definitely has a grudge against his father, and he's a self-made man. He's been away for a long time, but now, and everyone thought that he died, so there was a plot to murder him basically, and he's back for revenge, and so he's staying at this inn. He was a mysterious person at the beginning of book 1 that sent his man of business to rent this room, and he never showed up. Like, he was just always renting the room and he was never there. And at the very end of book 1, he shows up with like the other half of like the coin that he used to pay for it or whatever. Like, it was like his signet or whatever. And so at the end of book 1, I was like, ugh, can't wait for this one, because Angelique, who is she's outspoken, she's an extrovert, she's not afraid to speak her own mind. And when she first meets Lucy and Lord Balt, she's kind of a little bit flustered and stumbling, and so it was interesting to see Angelique, like a different side to Angelique. Not only is the sexual tension between Angelique and Lucian just so beautiful because they're a little bit antagonistic. I wouldn't say it's like a hate to love, but they bicker a little bit, but it's all wrapped up in this like beautiful sexual tension, and that's really great. But I think what makes this series stand out so much is it's not even just the hero and the heroine, it's all the background characters as well, the other people who are renting rooms in this inn. And we have recurring characters who are always there, and also we have new people that enter in and they have future books. So it's just like a very interesting like environment, and they kind of feel like a found family. So that's why this series has been so great for me to binge, because it was just so fascinating, so many different types of characters that are involved in this world, and I just really love this. So I ended up by giving this book 4.75 stars, which is a little bit higher than book 1. Both of them were solid stories, solid romances. The next book in the series is I'm Only Wicked with You. And the hero, Hugh Cassidy, was an American who was renting a room in book 2. And he's like on this mysterious mission that nobody really knows about. Like, he's in England for a purpose, but we don't know about it yet. And in this book, we find out that he's actually tasked by like his mentor to find his daughter, who just kind of like randomly decided to run away from home and go to England and maybe like find a lord to marry, and Hugh kind of had planned to marry her, so he's there looking for her. But he meets our heroine, Lady Lilias. Lady Lilias is the young daughter of, I think her father's an earl. They're at the inn because there was like some sort of infestation, like something, I can't remember if it was an animal or an insect or something, and her father like shot a hole through the ceiling or wall or whatever, so they are moving to this inn for a little bit while their home is being repaired. And so we have a different social class type of aspect to this romance. And also, I think that what makes this really interesting is Hugh is a made man. He's from America. He doesn't have that history of being descended from nobility and having this like long family history and stuff like that, which is completely different from the way that Lady Lilias has grown up. And she's being a little bit rebellious, like her family is kind of at a loss because she's the belle of the ball. Everyone has tried to propose to her, and her father is being very lenient, letting her refuse all these proposals. But suddenly she's like been a little bit rebellious. At the beginning of this book, Hugh catches her like smoking a cheroot, and he tells on her, which kind of starts their little antagonism. And he thinks of her as this little spoiled kind of rich girl of the nobility. And he comes from a completely different background, you know, literally self-made man. So I love these dynamics between opposing personalities and also just like different walks of life, and the way that they end up by connecting with each other. And I think that Julianne Long is so skilled at making sure that they have equal amounts of time spent alone. These moments that are stolen, they're not really supposed to be unchaperoned alone, but they do have those moments where they kind of understand each other a little bit more. And then also like that contrast with seeing with her family. I also really love the way that Julianne Long wrote Lilias's family, especially her father. I don't think that any of his comments are meant to be mean-spirited, but he'll make comments about like it's comparisons between the nobility and Hugh having like no history and coming from nothing. And I don't feel like any of it is ill-intentioned, but it can be seen as hurtful, and it's almost like he's making these comments because he doesn't know any better. And I like the way that Julianne Long handles all of that, because it's not a big deal, it's not a big conflict. And when Hugh addresses all these things, he's not offended. He's just like, well, let me just explain this to you. And he does. And I feel like it was a very productive conversation where Hugh is just making them aware of a different side to the story, or a different aspect or view that the father had never even considered before, just because he's grown up with a silver spoon in his mouth with a family history that goes back generations and generations, and he just can't imagine any other way of life. And here is Hugh, who obviously at the end of it becomes his daughter's husband, that is so different from what he expects, you know, his daughter to end up with. And I mean, I just really like the way that none of these characters are one-dimensional. They are very layered and fascinating, and I like to see the evolution of Lilias, and it was just very interesting, and I like it. It wasn't quite as good as book 1 and 2, so I gave this one 4 stars, but I still really like them, like solid reads. The 4th book in the series is After Dark with the Duke, and our heroine is Mariana Wilde, and she is desperate. She's desperately seeking lodgings because she's an opera singer, but suddenly she has this reputation, and they're calling her the harlot of Haywood Street, and it's because of a duel that was fought over her, and she is trying to just escape the mob who are just rioting against this situation that she was in the middle of. And she just like, it's not quite true, and she seeks shelter at this inn because of the stuff that went on with Angelique. Angelique's past history as a mistress kind of like got out into society papers, and so she was like, I think that y'all would be understanding, and I really need a place to stay. I'm still waiting on payment from, I think it was like her manager or somewhere where she's staying at a theater. She's still waiting for compensation. So she's just like, I will pay you in the future. I will do anything to help out, like please. And they're like very sympathetic towards Mariana. So she ends up by staying, and they have a new tenant, and he is the Duke of Valkirk. James is actually a war hero, and he got his title from being in the war. It was like compensation for being very integral in the war against Napoleon. So he has written basically a memoir that was very successful, and he has a deal with the publisher to write like a sequel, like another book. And he cannot work at his house. Like I think he has like construction that's going on in his house, and it's just like too much going on. So he thought maybe a change of scenery would be good. So he ends up by renting a room at the Palace of Rogues. It's the Grand Palace on the Thames. So again, we have like an opposites attract pairing. So James is a military man. He's very stoic. He is no nonsense. He's quiet. He prefers to just be unobtrusive. And then we have Mariana. She's an opera singer. She's a little bit of a flirt, and I think it's the reaction of James. He has really no reaction to her, and it kind of aggravates her that he's not responding in the way that she's used to men responding. And I kind of really like the fact that they are antagonistic toward each other. There's a couple of scenes where they're making sly barbs, and Julianne Long is really great at this as well, at writing these underhanded digs, but James takes it a step too far and embarrasses her. And as an act of atonement, Delilah and Angelique suggest that he actually teach her Italian, because she kind of claimed to know Italian because she sang some operas in Italian. And then he gave her a phrase to say in Italian that she didn't know what she was saying, and it embarrassed her and all that jazz. So he is supposed to give her Italian lessons, and this creates a forced proximity situation where they're forced to get to know each other. And I really like this, where you have a first impression of this person and you just think that they are this way, and that was your first impression. It was a bad impression, and then you're forced to actually spend time with them and you're like, oh wait, they're not so bad, and this is the reason why they reacted the way that they did, and now I understand them a lot better. And I really like romances that deal with that aspect of getting to the bottom of who this person truly is. And I just thought it was fantastic and I loved it. 4.25 stars. There is a little bit of I don't want to say it's an issue, because it's not a major issue that I really have, but I think it's obvious to say, like, he's a very traditional man, and falling in love with like an opera singer is definitely not what he had planned. Spoiler, he does originally offer her to be his mistress first, before he realizes he's being a big dum-dum and he wants to marry her. And I know a lot of people don't like when the hero offers the heroine of the story to be his mistress before he comes to his senses, but it doesn't really bother me that much. It's just like, you had a dum-dum moment and I'm okay, because you came to your senses, obviously. And then the last one, which is my personal favorite of the series so far, but I'm hearing really great things about book 6, so that one might be my favorite book once I do read that one. This one's called You Were Made to Be Mine, and the hero is Christian Hawkes. The heroine is Arlie. So she also comes to this inn looking for shelter, and Arlie is her real name. She is a runaway. And Christian Hawkes, he is playing a role of basically bounty hunter. This lord has tasked him to find his fiance who has kind of run away. And this lord has spun this story being like, you know, she's just getting like cold feet or whatever. And, you know, it's just, you know, a young woman's jitters about getting married, and I need you to go find her. I don't want her to get hurt, all of that jazz. Christian actually has a history with this lord. Christian has been basically kind of like in prison in Paris from the war because he was betrayed. And so he's looking for this traitor, and he suspects this man, this lord. And so he's trying to get to the bottom of it, and he is kind of like a wolf in sheep's clothing, like, yeah, I'm gonna help you find your fiance, but really he's looking for ways to take this guy down. And so I really like that aspect. And when he's researching, like, okay, who is this woman? Orly, she's an orphan. Her only living brother is living in America, so maybe she's gonna try to get to America. He wants to know why this woman has left this lord, like what has happened. And there's a couple of hints that there was this incident where she was left alone and she didn't have a chaperone, and then a month later she decides to run away. And then we see Orly come to the Grand Palace on the Thames, our favorite inn from this book, and she's looking for a room to rent until she can get in touch with one of her brother's friends who's still living in London and maybe can help her find passage to America to go meet her brother. But she's posing as a widow because it's so much safer for a woman who has been married before to be traveling alone, and it's not weird for her to be alone. So she's acting like she is a widow, Mrs. Gallagher. And in a very interesting turn of events, Christian, while he's sleuthing around, he's going to the end, he's kind of found her trail, and he actually gets robbed, it's stabbed. So they bring him into the inn. They think he is a vicar who has written ahead saying that he wants a room, and so they're like, oh my god, this must be him. And Orly decides that she's going to take care of him because this is something that she can do to kind of contribute. So she's like, I'm gonna stay up with him, I will nurse him back to health. And she's very intrigued, he's very beautiful and stuff. And when he wakes up and he sees her, not knowing that this is the woman that he is searching for, because of course she's going by Mrs. Gallagher, and he is like, are you an angel, am I dead? And I just really love that he suspects, he starts to suspect that maybe this is Orly, but he doesn't have proof yet, and so he's not telling her what his real intentions are. So they have secrets on both of their parts, and I just think that it was such a lovely, lovely romance. Obviously, this woman has had some bad experiences. Definitely trigger warning for sexual assault. There was that history with her fiance, who she thought was going to be a good man, and she was going to marry him like her parents always wanted her to find somebody of nobility, and you know, be well set up, and she thought that he was a good man and he wasn't, and she's taking matters into her own hands to protect herself. And I love how Christian is secretly always a champion for her, even before he knows that she is the woman that he's been looking for. And I just really like it. I think that this romance was so great. So I gave this one 5 stars, and I'm very excited for the last book in the series. The only other new book that I read for the second half of July was Beginning and End by Might Be Writing. This is a Hermione fanfic, and it is kind of like a prequel to Wait and Hope, which I loved Wait and Hope. I read that one last month. Wait and Hope is an amnesia romance where Hermione loses her memory and does not know that she's married to Draco. So there's this history about like how they originally fell in love, and that's what Beginning and End is. What prompted them to even be in the same vicinity, you know, years later after the Battle of Hogwarts. And so it kind of goes into all those details. I liked Beginning and End. I really like seeing them fall in love. I do think that it was a little bit too long. Like the author just dragged it out because everyone loved Wait and Hope so much, and Wait and Hope was a very tight story that I thought was like perfectly paced, and Beginning and End dragged a little bit, but it was still a solid Hermione fanfic. I mean, it was really good. So I give that one 4 stars. And then my 3 rereads, I did Powerless because we were recording it on the podcast, The Brazen, again, another podcast book that is going to be out in August, and then Captive of the Horde King, which I love Zoe Draven's sci-fi romance, and this is probably one of my favorite sci-fi romance series, and I do believe I might be doing a reread of the entire series for the month of August, just because I'm a big rereader. I love to read my favorite stories again and again. It's like comforting to me, and also a very easy way to still read when I have downtime at work. It's better to read a book I've already read at work than a new one, because then I feel like I'm not maybe absorbing as much, or I have to pay more attention to the book, and I don't want to be distracted by a book while I'm at work, but I still want to read, you know? Anyway, so those are all the books that I haven't talked about before, and I think when it comes to like which books were my favorite of this month, I definitely like You Were Made to Be Mine with Christian and Orly. Like they were just top tier historical romance, beautiful writing by Julianne Long, like just fantastic. I loved it. Of course, I really loved Muse of Nightmares as well by Laini Taylor. It was the second book in the Strange the Dreamer duet, which was a fantastic fantasy romance, like just top notch. I'm so happy about having such a good reading experience for last month's Patreon picks, so that was really great. Out on a Limb was another standout for the month of July. It was just such a beautifully heartwarming story and great disability representation. Hannah Bonham Young put like so much of herself into the heroine, and I just really enjoyed it. Was such like a sweet romance. The hero is so like marshmallowy cinnamon roll hero, like just perfect, but in such like a charming, endearing way. It was just so good. Remember Me by Mary Balog, the second book in her Remember series, was also fantastic as well. I'm very invested in this family saga and can't wait for the next book. I believe it's Ben. Ben has the next book, and he is the oldest son of the family, but he's a bastard son, and he also is a single dad. So like I love a single dad trope. I can't wait for his book to come out. And of course, like the rest of the Julianne Longs. This month was predominantly rereads. And I'm not mad about it. So yeah, had a good time in July. I'm hoping to have more first time reads for August. And it's also a readathon challenge for the Romance Readathon, and that's gonna be really fun. It's gonna be like point system. Definitely check out my August TBR video if you wanna learn more about that. I have all the links in the description if you wanna check that out as well. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye guys.